Got a question for you then, which is this. In terms of mental health, what is normal? Well, there isn't really, is there? Well, quite. But it gets really interesting because when we define mental health and we talk about people who are mentally disordered or not, we do tend to compare people to this idea of normal, yet nobody can define what normal actually is. But we do, don't we? We'll say things like, oh, well, that's not right. But what is right?
And that's not normal behaviour.
Yeah, right.
It is normal behaviour.
Absolutely. It gets really interesting.
To be sociable, acceptable.
Now that gets even more interesting then, doesn't it? Are we seeing then, and we might be seeing that normal is just socially acceptable.
Mm-hmm. But what is socially acceptable today isn't 50 years ago.
Indeed, it most certainly wasn't. And more than that, we're in Glasgow today. What's acceptable in Glasgow today is probably not acceptable in Hertfordshire today. Mm-hmm. And that's not because one is better than the other, it's because cultures are different. Yeah. And if you go farther afield, if you go to some other countries in the world, for example, you'll find it's different again. So is normal about fitting into your society right now? Where does that leave us in mental health?
You send yourself off your bloody head, think is this right? Even when you're kids, you know, your kids do something, you think, and you know, in the house, you let them do it next thing, don't you expect it to sit perfect, no move, and you think, I'm putting that stress on myself and on them, because you think it's no normal the way they're behaving.
Yeah.
We do it to ourselves, I think. We drive ourselves off our heads, because we think, is that expected, is that not expected, allowed to do that? Honestly, you question yourself at everything.
Yeah, I think that's right. And your point, I think with your point, Tanya, about changes. Just talking about kids, I've got 3 kids. I've got a little girl of my own and 2 stepsons. Mm-hmm. I've never hit any of them, and I never will, because to me that's not appropriate behaviour, and to me it's not normal behaviour to hit kids. But when I was growing up,
that was
the job. So it all changes, doesn't it? Which is really
interesting. At school with them.
Oh well, yeah, absolutely. I remember, I never actually had the cane, I was quite lucky, but I know a lot of lads who did. I just never got the caught. Let me give you this, which basically, this handout asks the question, what is mental disorder? But really what it's saying is, what is normal? There is a little exercise at the bottom of it. Up until fairly recently, homosexuality was defined as a mental disorder. I've got some questions for you. First one is, what do you think of the diagnosis? Secondly, how could mental health professionals have decided that homosexuality was a mental disorder? And thirdly, in 30 years' time, what will people say about today's treatments and diagnoses? So there's your questions. In your groups. Get your heads going.
Right,
Go on then. What do you make of homosexuality as a diagnosis of mental disorder? Can you get on the fence?
The fact is, well, I'm talking from personal experience of it in my daughter's case.
Right.
So, for me, I'm sitting looking at that, and I'm thinking, well, even though you're talking 30, 50 years ago, some of that is quite okay, you don't get put into mental institution now, but I'm thinking a lot, no, but obviously you're talking 50 years ago, you're talking about, you're talking about, the Catholic Church, you're talking about society. And
I didn't mention any of that. You're mentioning that.
But you had, people, it was the norm to go to church on Sunday, and it's more prevalent, I think, years back.
Okay.
I think there's a case
in society, what is accepted as normal in society.
Okay.
So obviously that was.
It's,
considered the
it,
norm.
it's interesting you say 50 years ago. When do you think it changed?
Not really that
Probably
long.
the 80s or something.
90s?
1992.
I'm surprised.
The current diagnostic manual was written in 1992. And that's when homosexuality stopped being seen as a mental disorder.
That's shocking.
Interesting, isn't it? So how could mental health professionals have decided that homosexuality was a mental disorder?
Is it not the case, right, if you're looking at mental disorders, there's an element that's saying that is abnormal, it's not within the norm.
Yes.
And if you're straight, then the idea of somebody engaging in homosexual practices, especially I'm talking from a guy's point of view, it's not something that you can relate to, so that there is a sense that it's
Right.
That's such a guy,
Yes.
Sorry, come to your lasses to
Should we not go there?
She's such a guy.
It's interesting though, because I agree with you, but that's exactly the same argument that prompts people who were talking about Anders Breivik before. It's exactly the same argument that gets people to say that Anders Breivik must be mentally ill.
Yeah.
It's because I can't get my head around it. In sort of the skeptical community, we talk about something called the argument from personal incredulity. What that means is, I don't understand it, so it's got to be wrong. But actually, we're all supposed to be different, so it's fair to do. Well, I think that's exactly it. It's to do with societal norms, because we need to know somehow how to structure our society and who we are, and sometimes I think we get a bit overzealous about excluding people, if that makes sense. Are you okay with me putting it like that? Because there's a bottom line to that, and it's not actually very nice. And the bottom line is that psychiatry, it does many things, but one of the things that psychiatry does is it holds up society's prejudices. Does that make sense? How do you feel about that? It's interesting, isn't it? Of course, that's not all it does. But I personally think that we're doing very well in psychiatry at getting away from that stuff, and we're actually more focused on diversity than we've been ever before. So we're getting there. But understand that there are bits of what we do in mental health care, and there will be bits of what happens with the people you work with that aren't really about them being ill, it's about them not fitting in. That's not as bad as it sounds, because actually, if you understand that and you can work on helping them to understand how to fit in, then actually that will do them a great service. It's maybe not an ideal situation, but we can only start from where we are. But by helping people to adapt to society, without making everybody clones, that's not what I'm saying, but by helping people to what we call function in society, which is really what that means, you're helping them to get beyond the problems that they've got at the moment. So there's good in that, there's a positive part to that as well. You alright with that? Okay, cool. Go on then. What are they going to say in 30 years' time about what we do? Probably, yeah.
The same sort of thing, like what's considered to be the norm will change.
Yeah, of course.
They'll look at us as being probably draconian and all that.
Maybe we're dead open-mindedness day and age, but God knows what's going to be like in 30 years. Scary, actually.
Yeah.
Because we're dead open-minded in this day and age. And we talk about everything more. As I'm saying, even you think about depression, years ago people just held it and you're just told to vomit. If you look at the percentage amount of people that go to their doctors now who are classed as having depression compared to years ago, I bet it's a vast number. Whereas in years to come, another 30 years from now, I'm trying to think what's going to be right.
There is something really interesting about that. And it's to do with what we mean by depression, because depression, we'll cover this shortly, but depression has a particular clinical definition, and there are certain symptoms that have to be there. And it's not the same as just being a bit sad. But an awful lot of people who are just a bit sad will class themselves as depressed, but actually most people who tell you they're depressed are just a bit sad. Interesting, that, isn't it? It's part of the pill for every ill culture that we've got. And you know, the reality is that we're not supposed to be happy all the time. That's actually not good for us psychologically anyway. We need some, just to keep ourselves motivated, we need some variation in the mood that we've got, you know, just to be healthy. I want to introduce you, and this will actually make sense of some of this anyway, I want to introduce you to the 3 basic models of mental disorder. What do I mean by model, by the way? No?
Structure.
Oh, you can have a structure like a model airplane. It's not the airplane, is it? But it's a way that you can understand the airplane.
In a generality.
Sort of, but if you like, it's think of it a little bit like a blueprint. It's not, but it's a way to understand the thing that you're talking about. And there are 3 models that are used mainly. First one, you'll be very familiar with, whether you knew this is what it was called or not, is the medical model, or the biological or biomedical model. 3 names for the same thing. That's the idea that, well, what does the medical model say about mental disorder? Does anybody know? Right, and why?
It's all chemicals.
It's all chemical, right. In its purest form, the medical model says all mental disorder is caused by a chemical abnormality or a structural abnormality. There's something wrong with the brain. That's why you were talking earlier about lobotomies and stuff. That's a medical model. There's something wrong with the structure of the brain. We'll cut that bit out.
See, just on that, right?
Yeah.
Is that why they do so electric shock treatment?
Slightly. Can I do the one at a time? We'll come back to you, Tanya.
I look after a man who's schizophrenic, right? And at the time that he was admitted to hospital, he was really struggling living in his own home, and he was in his mother's quite a lot. But at the same time, his mother was on the onset of dementia, so he was admitted to hospital because of the living arrangement, because he wouldn't live in his own home. But while he was in hospital, they decided that maybe he has dementia because he's getting quite forgetful. But the man's in his late 50s now, so they gave him one of these CT scans, but they don't give everybody with dementia, it's too expensive.
Yeah.
And because there was a change in the picture of which he was like before to now, he now has dementia. So he's with us, but he's in his late 50s, he's still got so many life skills, but I feel as if they feel like, oh, now that he's got dementia, we'll just treat the dementia, and schizophrenia will just take a backseat. So how can they determine, by looking at a picture, that it was that he now has developed dementia rather than there being a change in schizophrenia?
Okay. We're getting into what we call comorbidity, which is more than one diagnosis. Really. The diagnosis of schizophrenia means one thing, but dementia means something else, and dementia is actually much easier to track using things like, brain imaging, stuff like that. It gets interesting because if you have a dementing illness, if you have dementia, depending on the type of dementia, a lot of the treatments for antipsychotics will be damaging to you anyway. So a lot of the stuff that we would give because he's got a diagnosis of schizophrenia, we can't give for someone who's got dementia. So it's not that they're ignoring one, it's that this one takes precedence because the treatment for this, which is probably the most damaging, is the dementia, is very different from the treatment for antipsychotic, for psychosis. You can't do both.
Because his dementia is, seriously, really, really early on. If you were to meet him, you would say he's not got dementia. In fact, quite a lot of people don't think that he does have dementia, that it's a kind of learned behaviour, because he's obviously caught on that they ask enough and eventually get it. So I'm just going to ask enough and I will eventually. I think he's caught on that he sees somebody asking, and then eventually it is tea time, so somebody does that cup of tea.
Yeah,
so he takes it to be, I want to do this, and I'm just going to keep asking you until and this can go on for the whole shift. But there doesn't seem to be anything. That's just his dementia. But they're not realising that this is affecting the whole social environment to everybody around them, because he kind of seems to latch on, to people, because his mum since then has passed away. So the focus has went from wanting to go and visit his mum to something else.
Okay, I'm a bit confused. And the reason I'm confused is because what you're describing is a strategy to get what he wants. That's not necessarily to do with a dementia or to do with a diagnosis like schizophrenia. That's just somebody doing the best they can with what they've got. And maybe rather than worrying about how to diagnose behaviour, which is a bit difficult anyway, why don't you just give them a cup of tea?
Because see when you do, it just moves on to another thing.
Okay, well then what I would suggest is get into challenging behaviour strategies rather than worry about medicalising what is just something this fella's doing to get his needs met. Does that make sense?
He's got nothing else to do his day probably, so he's probably sitting there thinking, that was you sitting there.
Sometimes it can be something like one of the workshops, so the jacket's down, the watch down, and you're like, we can't take you, you were there this morning, we can't take you, and it just goes on from there. But I still find it difficult how they can explain how he's been in to hospital and he's always had schizophrenia, and now I don't see how they're kind of meeting his needs, and they kind of give us much more kind of information about his schizophrenia because he's always lived in the community, he's always lived independently.
Right. There's a couple of things. This might surprise you, but actually when you say this guy's got schizophrenia, there are an awful lot of people who would say nobody has schizophrenia because schizophrenia is a made-up diagnosis that doesn't make any sense. In which case we're looking at other things anyway. So there is no, and I don't want to give you an opinion on what I think about that because who cares what I think, it doesn't matter. But there are really strong arguments both sides, and there's a really strong argument that schizophrenia doesn't exist anyway. Consequently, what we're left with is how do we meet this guy's needs regardless of whether we call it schizophrenia, dementia, dual diagnosis, or just a behavioural strategy. And that's not slagging it off. We all use behavioural strategies. We do stuff to get what we want. And I think sometimes we overcomplicate by trying to focus on a diagnosis. It's really just a pigeonhole to put somebody in. What matters is that person. Does that make sense?
Of course it does.
So if he wants to go to the shops, maybe there's a reason why you can't take him to the shops, in which case you need to find a way around them. But what I would suggest you do is get into things like ABC chats and stuff like that, because usually you find if there is a behaviour that's really causing problems, it's usually because what they're actually trying to achieve is not what it looks like they're trying to achieve. And the best way to do that is a thing called an ABC chart. Have you come across that?
I wasn't sure of that.
Right, well what was the pattern? What came out?
That it was always leading up to the days before and after they had his depot injection, and everything you gave him didn't really actually want it in the first place. You know, you would give him it and that would get done.
Yeah, but that's not what it's about. Yeah, so you're quite right, it's not what it's about. Yeah. So,
and he couldn't got him other appointments at psychiatrists, got his CPN out, and it's not that. I mean, he's getting so anxious, so anxious about something that we've explained we can't do. He can't be a cup of tea every 10 minutes.
Right, but he's not actually anxious about the cup of tea, is he?
I know, but he's getting anxious, and you're saying, why are you asking me for a cup of tea? No reason. There must be. No, there's no reason. I just want to ask you for one.
Right, don't focus on the thing you don't want to focus on. I can't do challenging behaviour today because that's not the thing for now. But one thing I will say is, in challenging behaviour work, you never focus on the thing you don't want. You focus instead on the thing that you do. The more you focus on him asking for a cup of tea, the more likely he is he's going to ask for a cup of tea. So don't. That doesn't mean ignore him. It means that you find other things that you can focus on. Because one way is people often talk about things like that as attention seeking and stuff like that. I will tell you this story, but then I need to move past it because it's not really what we're here for. But it's come up. I remember going to a very big nursing home on 2 levels in Leicestershire, and there was I was quite lucky because I went back several times and worked with the same staff team several times, a few weeks apart on different things. One of them we did was challenging behaviour. They told me about this guy. I'll draw this for you so you see how it works. Where's my pen? Right. You've got like a really big hall or room like that, and you've got the front door in there, and there's a stairwell there that goes upstairs to the next level. There is a dining hatch there, a serving hatch. Then there's the door to the kitchen. There are lots of tables and chairs dotted about, sort of cafe style thing, and there are lots of residents sitting around these tables and generally being how people are in residential homes, essentially. And there's the dining table, and there's an old guy, we'll call him George. Let's not read his name, but we'll call him George. George is in a wheelchair, and he sits at the dining table there, and he reads his paper. And he reads his paper until mealtime. And when the mealtime comes, all these people come and they sit at the table around George. And George starts demanding to be served first. And if he doesn't get fed first, he throws crockery at all these other people. Which is not particularly pleasant. The staff told me about this and they said, we can't work it out, we don't know what's going on. So I said to them, and I'll say the same question to you, all right, what do you think this is about? What's George playing at?
He was there first, that's what I was thinking. He took his place in the queue.
Okay, he was there first, so he thinks he has some sort of status, some seniority. Okay, that was one of the things he said. What else? Sorry? He just wants his own way, he's just bullshit. Yeah? What else?
He maybe likes to set himself as he gets agitated because of these other people he enjoying them.
Okay. So we've got a degree of anxiety there because of the fact that there are other people around. Showing up. Yeah. Any more? So it's that seniority thing. Okay. Let me tell you the other bit. It took a while for the staff to tell me this because I didn't know what questions to ask at first. But the general routine for the staff is.
Also, he's right beside the serving hatch.
He's right beside the serving hatch.
So he thinks he should be first.
Okay. So there's something about his proximity. These are all the sorts of things that the staff said. Let me tell.
Also interacting with any of the other service users because he's on his own all the time.
He's on his own.
You've isolated him on that table reading the paper, but all the other residents are all around the other tables interacting with each other, getting to know each other. And he doesn't know them. He only sees them at the meal time because he's at the table by himself.
Actually, it wasn't so much they were interacting with each other. He was the only person on that floor who didn't have an advanced dementia. He was the only one who could read the paper, for example. Right. And he had nothing in common with anybody else. Except for the staff, he could have talked to them. Now what's really interesting is, can you imagine how many times the staff go backwards and forwards past George through that door
and don't speak to him?
And don't speak to him. Come meal times, he had a way, and we talk about attention seeking, I'd rather talk about attention need.
Yeah.
This guy needed some sort of interaction and he wasn't getting it, and he hadn't been getting it, and he had no prospect of getting it for the rest of his life, really. If that was you, what would you do to get people to notice you? How far would you go?
I'd do it yourself.
Right, absolutely, because he's got nothing else. What the staff used to do is they would take George when he started throwing stuff and they'd sit him over here, and one of the staff would sit with him and tell him off. And then when everybody else had finished, he would come back and he'd have his meat and tatty pie with congealed gravy and he'd have his solid custard and all of that. And it was worth it to George because that was the price he paid for a little bit of company.
That's so sad.
Isn't it? You know what we did? Dead easy. What we did was we started basically a rota system. Every day somebody who was working on that floor was identified as George's worker. Didn't matter what teams they were normally in. One person was George's worker, and all he did, every time that person went past George, they stopped and said, all right, George, what's in the paper? Anything interesting? And they have a 2-minute conversation with
It's
George.
sad to call you in for you to have to say that. So is that not why you're in the care field?
Well,
That just drives me cuckoo.
But, see, you can say that, but it's not the obvious thought. These are the obvious thoughts, but they're not them. That's not what was going on. Well, what happened is, the first one, I couldn't tell you the names anymore, we'll say it was a girl called Julie. I can see her face, but I couldn't tell you her name, but we'll say she was called Julie. Julie noticed that actually George was quite an interesting fella. And he knew stuff, and he knew about the people that she knew, and the places that she knew, and all of that. So next day, when it's Amanda's turn, Amanda's talking to George, but so's Julie. Because Julie's still doing it because she enjoyed it. And then you've got Amanda and Julie, and next day Deborah joins in. Within about a fortnight, all of the staff, whenever they went past George, stopped and had a crack with George. And he stopped throwing crockery.
That happened somewhere I worked before when I first started working in the care field. I worked in a nursing home. And this elderly lady, her room was at the very end of the corridor, the last room. She used to just come down, she used to have a clock in her room, she knew what meal time, so I wouldn't speak to anybody, never spoke. She came down, getting me at meal time, sit at the same table, go straight back to her room. They spoke to her because she didn't speak to them. And I started going up to her and I found out she spoke to me strong. She was a headmistress of her school. She told me every bit of life. She'd heard out to hear that we never knew because she'd get pinned up. I used to sit and brush it, talk to him. My days off, I'd then bring my nieces and nephews in for her to see, and she loved it. Brought back old memories of her being a headmistress. And then when I left, she was coming down and sitting any time in the day room and all that, sitting and talking to people. I thought all it takes is to put your mind into how they're feeling, just to chat to them, and I brought her out. And she was just after sitting everybody else.
Going back to what you were saying now. You're absolutely right. I'm moving on because I need to move on.
Just reminded me that.
Your guy may actually, if we forget diagnosis for a minute and just look at the person, it may be that what he needs is some other form of interaction, and maybe his anxiety is related to other circumstances rather than what we're assuming maybe some sort of medical illness going on. Does that make sense? Now, I don't know him. But it's worth thinking about, because usually, just like with this guy, what you think he's trying to achieve is not what it means. Usually it's something else. Now, it might be that he's more vulnerable to that as his depot is wearing off. But that doesn't mean that all we think about is the depot. It might be that we just need to make a bit more of an effort at that time to give him something else, to distract him away from the mounting anxiety that gets him to ask for stuff. And my initial thought is, if somebody is repeatedly asking for stuff they don't want, it's not because he wants a cup of tea, it's because he wants to know that there is somebody there looking out for him. So demonstrate that. He won't need to ask. You just prove it first. But I might be wrong, I've never met the fellow. But they're the sorts of things I would think about. Anyway, this leads us to, we've said the biological model, the medical model, that's saying it's all biology. The social model is saying biology, rubbish to that. It's not biology, it's how people treat each other. Which is exactly what that is there, isn't it? And a really good example of that is, you could say that the fact that I'm in a wheelchair, I'm not, of course, but if I were, the fact that I'm in a wheelchair is not the cause of my problems. My problems are that I can't get on buses, and I can't get into most public buildings, and society excludes me from things that other people take for granted. That's what causes me problems. That's in physical care, but it's easy to get that for people sometimes. In terms of psychiatry, let's say that I'm a voice hearer. The voices aren't the problem. It's the fact that society thinks I'm an axe-wielding murderer that's the problem. And actually, if society treated people better, then instead of having mental disorders, we may have differences. And also, people wouldn't be treated so badly that they ended up getting depressed or becoming anxious or whatever it might be. Does that make sense? Problem with that is they don't seem to fit together very well, do they? You've got the doctor who's saying, it's all biology, we'll give you some tablets, which is seemingly what's happening with your health. Then you've got someone else, maybe somebody like me, who comes in and does sort of behaviour work, and I'll say, oh, it's nothing to do with that, it's this. That leaves you stuck right in the middle with no clue what to do. And that's not fair. And it also doesn't really work. What's the alternative? It gets better than that, Mark. We get better than that. A bit of both.
Make it up. Back to basics.
Welcome to, I love this, if you get nothing else from this course, get this. Welcome to the stress and vulnerability model of mental disorder. This is cracking. One of the biggest regrets I have is that in 3 years of training as a mental health nurse, nobody ever told me about this. I got this later on in a different course when I've been qualified for years, and it's vital everybody should know this. But I need to pick on somebody. Is anybody who doesn't mind me picking on them? Thank you very much. Linda? Yes. Linda, yes, I got a name right. Right, Linda, I want you to imagine you've had a really bad day. I'll tell you why it's a bad day. Are any of your colleagues in this room?
No.
No, right, okay, we're going to have to make it up then. Donna. Donna! Right, Donna, you're Linda's boss. Congratulations. Big promotion. You are service manager for the unit that she works in. And you've got a problem, because you've got a couple of things you need to do. One of the things that you need to do is you need to sign off some some key performance indicators that have to go up to head office, and if they don't get to head office by the end of today, there's going to be problems with funding because they won't be able to forward it to the commissioners, and actually there'll probably be redundancies. So it's important. It's got to go off, and that's your priority. But you've got this other thing you need to do, which isn't as important, but it still needs to be done today. You know, however, the other thing is to do with updating, not care plans, but service plan reviews. You know that Linda is more than capable of doing that. She's not. It's not her job, but she's good. She's good at what she does. So you go to Linda and you say, Linda, would you mind doing this for me? You're very flattered, Linda, but that gives you a problem because you've actually got a full day's work to do. So you say, well, I can do that. It's no problem, Donna, but if I do it, what do I do about this? And she says, it's all right. Get Tanya to do it. You do that thing for me and ask Tanya to do these things out of your normal job, and then everybody's done stuff and get everything finished, and it's fine. So Linda, you go to Tanya and you say, Tanya, will you do this stuff for me? And Tanya's one of these people, she likes to please. You'll have met them, whatever you ask them to do, they'll say yes. They never bloody do it, but they'll say yes. You've met them, haven't you? You know people like that. It's because she's realised that there is no Santa Claus and she's frightened of it. And that's why people do that, it's because they know there's no Santa Claus. So they need other people to like them because they're scared of the world. And they're frightened that if they say no, people won't like them. That's why people do that. So you're really frightened to say no to anybody. You can't do it. There's no way you can do it. But Donna asks you and you say, yeah, Donna, of course I will. I'll do that. Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that you've passed on to Tanya is really important. And it's to do with a complaint, and it's got to be handled sensitively, and it's got to be done today. Otherwise, who's your MP? You don't know who you are. How can you not know?
I'm supposed to be voting tomorrow.
I know, I don't know anything about it.
Okay,
Must have changed.
let's say it's that nice Mr. Salmon, okay? He's your MP, because he's the only Scottish member of Parliament I know. He's your MP, and he is basically big mates with the person who's doing the complaining, and you've got to sort it out. So you give it to Tanya. Tanya says, yeah, of course I will. But unfortunately, Tanya's scared of everyone, including this fella, who's the mate of the MEP or the MSP. So you just go home and hide in the airing cupboard. That's all you do. You go and hide in the airing cupboard. You think she's done it. You go away and do your bit, Donna. You do your bit. Everything's fine. You do your bit for Donna. You do all of the overview stuff that you have to do. And then at 5 o'clock you get a phone call from your local member of the Scottish Parliament jumping up and down, and you're going to have your head because you ignored a complaint by the bloke who plays golf with. Except you didn't, because you'd passed it on to Linda. And Linda had passed it on to Tanya. So she says, I passed it on to Tanya, so you phone Tanya and you said, Tanya, did Linda pass on some stuff to you and you're so scared? So you say, yeah, there's a phone in the airing cupboard, yeah, a big extension bell. Yeah. So you said, no, because you're frightened to admit it, because that's your personality, you're scared of the world. So all you know then is that you had a plan that would have worked, but guess who messed it up? That would be Linda. Your word against hers. You're a bit stuffed, aren't you? The very last thing that Donna says to you is, look, I can't deal with this now. I've had a bad day, I'm tired, I've just had a real chewing off from the MSP. I want to see you tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock, in my office. You may bring a representative if you wish. What does that mean? When your boss says you can bring a representative, what does that mean? Yeah, you're in it up to here, aren't you?
That's what you get for trying to help.
Well, yeah, you know that thing, no good deed ever goes unpunished.
I know.
I'm going to assume that Linda is an average person, as I will assume about all of us in this room. None of us are going to be particularly special, and none of us are going to be particularly bad copers either. We're going to be all in the middle. So there you go. You are mid-range vulnerability. We're going to draw a little graph here, which is called the stress and vulnerability graph. Now then, As long as your stress doesn't get to that point there, you're going to be alright. You're okay, but your stress has gone up to that point there because you've got to go and see your boss and you're not very happy. It's been a bad day, but Donna's not going to come. So Tanya's not going to come clean, and Donna's probably going to sack you tomorrow. How do you feel?
Vulnerable. Stressed.
Stressed. Put that into psychiatric terms. What's the psychiatric term when people say stressed? What do they mean? Anxious. That'll be fair to say you're a bit anxious?
Yes.
Yep. Okay, you're a bit anxious. So, I'm not going to ask you what you do. That's about another exercise later. We'll talk about how people cope. But now it's just the fact that you're anxious. You go into work tomorrow and, I'm afraid that because what you do, because you're really not very bright, you get Tanya to come and support you.
Oh my God.
Tanya's not only scared of the world, she's also
scared of you.
she's also going to drop you in it because she's more scared of Donna than she is of you. So you get the sack. Your stress has gone up to here now.
That's me, I'm getting hate mail now.
How do you feel now? You've gone through anxiety. What's next? You've got the sack. Oh, you're about to lose your house, by the way. Because that's what happens, isn't it? You know, you're not going to get a job in this climate, especially not with having just been sacked for gross misconduct. That's what she's going to do. What I want to know is how you feel.
Shit.
Shit. Okay, could you put that into psychiatric terms?
I'm quite low now.
You're quite low now. Okay. I'm going to say that you're actually depressed.
Right.
Because that's the psychiatric term. There is no psychiatric diagnosis of quite low. Sorry in all that.
I'm still positive though. So I wasn't depressed, I'm still
Right,
low.
you're not in that case. This is a really interesting point, and it's something people miss about the relationship between anxiety and depression. If you're anxious, remember we said earlier, anxiety is a call to action.
Mm-hmm.
That's what your body does to you, because anxiety is a physical response more than anything else. It's freeze, flight, and fight. And that's your body getting you ready to fight your corner.
Mm-hmm.
So you're anxious before the meeting. You have the meeting with Donna, and you lose, but the meeting's over now, and it's done. You're not anxious about something that's done. Nobody is ever anxious about the past. They're only ever anxious about what they think is going to happen in the future.
Mm-hmm.
So you're now depressed, which is about giving up. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Now that's very, very broad, and it's not quite that cut and dry. There's more to it than that. But in very broad terms, anxiety is about sorting stuff out, and depression is about giving up.
Mm-hmm.
You stop banging your head against the brick wall. So you are now depressed because your stress has gone up. Here's where it gets interesting. You do lose everything. Because in this climate, that's what happens, isn't it? And it actually does happen to people. At the moment, there are folk who are losing their houses and losing their families and all of that. Because of the financial issues that we've got. Have you noticed the massive upsurge of things like food dispensaries and church soup kitchens and stuff like that? So, this is not the time to lose your job, but you have. And you start getting depressed ideas. Give me an illustration of, or an example of the sorts of thoughts that people have when they're depressed. Could be suicidal. If people are suicidal, why are they suicidal?
You want to
Cancer.
That's it. Yes, it's hopelessness, helplessness, any other? Guilt, perhaps?
Mm-hmm.
Feeling that other people would be better off without them, perhaps? It can be, yeah. Some of these things are irrational, aren't they? Some of them can be quite rational, like, the situation is really poor. But one of the more irrational things that people get in depression is what we call a delusion of guilt. I don't know what I did wrong. Actually, when you think about it, you did nothing wrong. But you must have done something wrong because you're the one that got the sack and you're the one in the cardboard box. So you don't know what you did wrong, but it must have been your fault. You did it and you deserve this. This is happening to you because you deserve it. That's the sort of things that people think when they're depressed, isn't it? That gets increasingly irrational, and it genuinely does. So people can actually end up having all sorts of psychotic experiences around that. Not just the delusion, of what we call delusion of guilt. But people do actually, if the stress goes up enough, they'll start to hear voices, they'll start to have thought disorders, and they'll start to see things. And they do get paranoid delusions and stuff like that. Until you actually end up, as your stress melts, because it's really living in a cardboard box, isn't it, with Glasgow, you end up psychotic. Congratulations. Well done, Linda. You are now. You know that woman off The Simpsons with the cats? That's Linda. I'm not really laughing, actually, because, to be fair, that is the journey that a lot of people take that end up walking around town like the old woman off The Simpsons with the cats. That's the sort of journey a lot of people take. But can you see, the important thing is, can you see how anxiety leads to depression, which leads to psychosis? Does that make sense to you all? Good. Right, now then, here's a question for you. Thank you for letting me pick on you, Linda, and the other two that I just co-opted. Thank you for letting me pick on you as well. Here's a question for you. What can we do to help Linda not become psychotic? Well, we could do, but that's unlikely to happen. I don't know, is it? What does that mean?
Alternative thought therapy. Something like that.
There's a CBT.
CBT.
Right, okay. Simpler than that. It's much simpler than that. If you weren't Linda, if you were the Dalai Lama and your vulnerability was about there because you'd worked on yourself that much, you'd take this in your stride. You still wouldn't have been anxious, would you? Because you've got to get out of well. This is well. You've got to get out of well on the graph. Dalai Lama, look at how high his stress would have to be before he got psychotic. One way that we can do it is to make Linda, sorry? Yes, we make her less vulnerable. Another one is to help her to manage her stress, because actually there are ways to prevent this stuff happening in the first place. Like if you were using various stress management levels about understanding the people who are around you and who to ask for favours and who not to, you'd know not to ask her.
And you've noticed like the union rep.
Well, that and all, yeah. So by helping her to manage her stress, we can make a huge difference. But stress happens anyway. What we could do is we could help you with, now you mentioned CBT, with that we're looking at psychological stress. It could be that as your mood goes down, you might do what a lot of people do, which is turn to alcohol. A lot of people, when they're anxious and then when they're depressed, turn to alcohol. That just makes it worse. That makes you go up this chain or this scale quicker. So deal with that. We could get you a decent sleep pattern. That will make a big difference. These are all biological stresses. We could talk about, well, maybe you should go and see the citizens' advice and see what you can do from that. That would be getting you some sort of social support and social networks, or just using your friends, or making sure you've got friends. Mm-hmm. That will knock it down a bit as well. We're probably not going to make you the Dalai Lama, but that's okay. We can get you to a point where you're strong enough to deal with that. Well, okay, you're a bit anxious. That's okay. It never gets any higher than that.
I could go and talk to other people about how it is to be sacked, teach them.
You could
Giving
actually.
me a sense of.
You could do all of that.
Do not do what I did.
Yeah, absolutely.
Don't take part.
You could set up a website called salutatorylessons.com and stuff. You could do all sorts of things. Be that Carly, wouldn't it? You could do all sorts of things.
You've got to be careful, you know, people won't apply for jobs at the
Yeah, but there's more than life in the Dosh, isn't there?
I go and see a doctor, that's probably going to tell my pal, he's like a daily records. Once I've told him, everybody knows
Well, interestingly, one of the things about that's both social and psychological, and this doesn't work for everyone, but I do know a lot of people this does work for, is they have a policy of no secrets. Because you can't threaten me with what you know about me if everybody knows. Mm-hmm. And most people don't care. There was that lovely phrase, I couldn't tell you who said it, but a lovely quote, which is something like, you wouldn't worry what other people thought about you if you knew how little they thought at all. Yeah, that's brilliant. Well, actually, most people don't care. They're not interested in you. They're interested in their own stuff. You might be a 9-day wonder, but by having no secrets, that's actually a technique some people use very effectively. Other people don't.
I think in today's world, you know, the way society is, like, there's a lot of unemployed blackmailers, you know what I mean? Just nobody's bothered.
I know.
There are 5 types of stressor. There are also the 5 types of coping mechanism. You're going to get all of this on a handout in a minute, but I'd like to talk it through with people first. Look. Biology. You know that thing we said about the biological model? Yeah, it's in there. Medicine might not be everything, but it's part of the story. Social. People who have loads of supportive friends or who live in nice environments tend to do a lot better than the guy in the little run-down bedsit with a stairwell that's full of people using substances and all of that, because they've got a more secure social situation and environment. So lots of mates, decent mates, whatever decent means, but you understand what I'm saying. Then we also have, with social culture as well, we also have psychological, sorry about this, that's all right, and developmental. If you can help somebody get their biology right, let's say you've got somebody who looks like they're always psychotic. The medical model would say that's because they're just, to use the term you brought up earlier, schizophrenic. And it's them, and they're psychotic because of what and who they are. Social model would say that person's psychotic all the time because everybody treats them really badly, but that's probably not fair on everybody else either. Stress and vulnerability model will say, well, we've got a biological vulnerability perhaps, and maybe we could do with helping people to respond to them a little bit better, think about it a bit differently. But there's much more to it than that. But if you can get someone, for example, to get a decent sleep pattern, do a bit of exercise, I like Alfred the Great's 8-hour thing. It's 8 hours work, 8 hours recreation, 8 hours sleep. Cracking. That's a danger. But Alfred the Great said it first. Well, that will take this person up here will take them down quite a long way, actually, just doing that. People with a bit of medication in the mix, that might help as well, although medication can be a double-edged sword, but sometimes we need it. If you can make sure that they're in an environment that's conducive and where they can feel safe, that will make a difference. If you can then get them to have good quality interactions, like the old guy I was telling you about in the nursing home in the wheelchair at the dining table, the more interactions we got, the less vulnerable he was, because he didn't sit there and dwell on how rotten his life was. If you can, let's say you've got somebody who's living in a grotty little bedsit and you can move them into somewhere better, that'll make a difference as well. Psychology, that's where stuff like the CBT you mentioned earlier, that will come in. Lots of little tricks that we use in that. And actually what we've done, we still haven't made this person the Dalai Lama, but he's on a par with Linda. And Linda, you're not ill, are you? That's recovery. It's about making people strong enough to cope with the situation that we're all in. But you have to look at all of their vulnerabilities. That's why I say get this, the stress and vulnerability model. Because it's better than just biology, and it's better than just social, and it's better than just psychology. It's all of it in one, and you can make sense of it in a way that works. Are you okay with that? You understand why that's so important? If you get nothing else, get this. Well, I'll give you that on a handout. And then I'm going to do stress and vulnerability, and then I'm going to give you something to do, because I've witted at you long enough. And I wouldn't like to sit there and just listen to me, but it would be even worse than you. Any questions, comments, or challenges? No? Jolly good. Okay. For this exercise, we need some stressors to work on. These are things that will stress you lot out. So let's just make a quick list. Only 2 minutes, and you've all got something to choose from for the exercise I'm going to give you to do. So, what stresses you out? Sorry? Okay, what about work, though? Be specific. What about work?
Conflict within the staff and management.
Okay. So, staff conflict. Okay, what else?
Stop sleepover.
Night shift.
Just basically the violence between residents.
Okay. Any more? Oh, it doesn't all have to be work. There's all sorts of things that annoy people.
Queuing in the checkout. The
Huge.
electronic machines. It's meant to be quick, and you're there longer than the person at the checkout with a human attack.
Any more?
Lack of money.
Poverty. It's easy to write the lack of money, and it does for me.
No pay rise.
Okay, so maintained poverty. Any more?
Bills,
Bills? Yeah. Any more?
traffic,
Traffic.
Sorry,
Yeah.
what we're on?
Stuff that's stressful.
public transport,
Relationships.
buses,
Any more for any more?
Just life in general,
House,
everything's
family,
stressful.
children.
Job security?
Okay. Which really is threat of unemployment, isn't
Yes.
Teenage kids asking me to have a party in the house.
it? Kids who recently discovered hormones. Bereavement. Sorry?
Bereavement.
Bereavement.
Divorce.
A joyous occasion. I remember. Any more?
Could the list keep going on?
What are you
Kids take drugs. So, relations not hard.
Actually, rather than taking drugs or anything, I'm just going to put making mistakes. Like what we all do, but when you're a parent, you sort of worry about it, don't you? That's probably enough, although feel free to add to it. What I would like to ask you to do, now you can do this either as groups or as individuals, but choose one or maybe two of them, no more, and please note down how you react to them. And then comes the good bit. Then see if you can identify what symptoms somebody like me might say you were suffering from when you reacted like that.